But we start with this. President Cyril Ramaphosa is visiting vaccine sites around Gauteng to assess the progress of the rollout program. Government wants to increase the number of people being vaccinated as the pandemic continues to wreak havoc. eNCA's Masego Rahlaga is in Tembisa and joins me now for an update. And Masego, this was a visit about the increasing the number of vaccination sites, but also just checking on how the vaccine program is going. We'll get to that in a moment and the President's thoughts on responding to COVID-19 and the third wave. But this also provided an opportunity for the media to ask questions about such issues as, you know, what's the President's thinking about whether or not he needs to rejig his cabinet in the wake of the failures in as far as security and intelligence are concerned in the last few weeks. And he was being as cryptic as ever. We are none the wiser, are we, as to whether or not he'll be instituting a cabinet reshuffle?
Well, he really left us in the lurch, Thulasizwe. I mean, if you were listening as well as the viewers, the President didn't want to be drawn to answering questions about a possible cabinet reshuffle. He kept on asking media colleagues exactly who they thought he needs to fire. He kept on asking us if we wanted him to say that he would fire some people. So, Thulasizwe, he wouldn't really be drawn to, answering any of our questions when it came to a cabinet reshuffle. He just basically told us to calm down. If it happens, he'll let us know. But for now, that's not what he's concentrating on.
It kind of reminds me of that iconic moment with eNCA Larsen a few years ago and former President Jacob Zuma, because it was exactly in this context where eNCA was asking about a cabinet reshuffle, and former President Jacob Zuma says, you know, forget about it. If it happens, I will let you know, with that iconic moment, of course, where he then says, I will call you if I have your number and tell you when I will be instituting a cabinet reshuffle. The other issue that came up, Masego, was the issue... Yeah, go ahead.
That was, of course, a funny moment. But, of course, I wanted to go back to why, maybe to have the public understand why the media has been asking that particular question about the cabinet reshuffle. And, of course, it goes back to the unrest that we saw in the country 3 weeks ago, basically putting the country on its knees financially. Economically, we are already performing very badly, and therefore there were questions from a lot of people as to why the police minister and especially the state security minister, Ayanda Dlodlo, didn't know, about instigation and why they didn't prepare. We saw, for instance, in Nkandla, before the looting took place, there had already been warnings that there would be such things, not only from the former president himself saying that, send me to jail, I'll be okay, but also his son, Edward Zuma, saying that there would be war. There were also MK veterans who were warning that if the former president is indeed told to go to jail, or if they come fetch him, there will be war. So that was a very relevant question to ask the president. But also, Thulasizwe, you'd remember that weird fight or argument between the police minister, General Begicele, and the state security minister, Ayanda Dlodlo, last week, when Dlodlo said to the media that she had, in fact, sent a report to the police ministry or to the police executive to let them know that this was going to happen, and they didn't act. But of course, then we saw General Begicele responding to say, no, I didn't receive such a report on my desk, and there was no such report. Now the DA this week saying that it wants to use the Information Act to make sure that, if there was such a report, it's released. And if that report really does exist, then the Minister of Police must go. So that's why the media was asking those questions.
Absolutely. And President Ramaphosa himself had said, quote unquote, we are reviewing that situation. And it's a valid question. Then if you are reviewing at some point, you must come out and say, what did your review find and what decisions are you making? My own sense of it, of course, Masego, is that these are complicated matters, because the whole issue of a cabinet reshuffle, while it's the prerogative of the president, there are political realities that he's dealing with of, his power in the National Executive Committee of the ANC, for example, let's say he reshuffles maybe 5 of those cabinet ministers who happen to be his allies. Do they remain his allies and back him up politically in the NEC? What does that do if a motion were to be moved by, I don't know, he's got many critics inside the NEC. I'm not saying that's all the sum total of the considerations. I would imagine that's one of them. But let's talk about another matter that also has to do with the cabinet and the executive, Masego. The whole question of the SIU report around digital vibes and Minister Zweli Mkhize, the suspended health minister. Did we get any insights there about the president's thinking?
Well, the president was asked about what his actions would be or his sanctions if there should be against the suspended health minister Zweli Mkhize, if of course that SIU report says that he was found wanting. His answer was also not too telling in terms of whether or not he's actually even seen that report. The president saying that this is something that he still needs to apply his mind to. It's not something that he can make a decision about overnight. But of course, Tulasizwe, it's been something that the SIU, we understand, has given to the president almost more than a month ago, as far as we understand, so that there can be a decision on whether or not the suspended minister comes back or the acting minister, Mamoloko Kubai, continues on this part of, of her responsibilities. So he didn't really give us an answer even there. But of course, that one is also that type of just forget about it for now. He will definitely be answering and coming back to the public to let them know exactly what the decisions have been and what the SIU report has said about digital vibes, the suspended minister's alleged involvement in the awarding of that tender. Of course, we found out also about his son being bought a vehicle and digital vibes being linked to his son. So depending on what the SIU report says, the president promising the nation also at the same time that definitely he will act accordingly.
And then let's focus then on what this visit is actually about. The progress around the vaccination program and scaling up the number of sites that are operational, as well as the supply of vaccines. The president assuring the nation that there's going to be a steady supply of vaccinations?
That's correct. There were, of course, a lot of questions that were posed to the president, and unfortunately, those of us who still had our hands up were quickly told that the president can't spend too much time here. But of course, the questions to Lasizwe were about the fact that there was an announcement that more vaccines have been approved and that they would be arriving soon. People asking the president today, the media asking the president today exactly when those vaccines would arrive. Have they arrived? When will they start going into circulation to be part of this rollout? Of course, there was the question to Lasizwe that I had, for instance, about the fact that on Monday, earlier this week, we heard that South Africa has inoculated 10% of its population. But, government's target to Lasizwe for herd immunity, we know, is 67% by December. Now, if government has only been able to inoculate 10% between April and now, I wonder how fast they'll have to go to arrive at 67% by December. Of course, they do say that in between that it's because of vaccine hesitancy and people opting not to take the vaccine. They're hoping that now that other age groups have been allowed to register and start inoculating, industries, for instance, such as journalists as well, being allowed to inoculate, that would bring up the percentage of those people who've been inoculated in the country. And not only that, they're hoping that the younger age group would be able to motivate for the older age group 60 and above to be able to come and get vaccinated. We've heard a lot of stories, to Lasizwe, from people who are saying that, I tested positive for COVID, I ended up in hospital, but because I had the first jab or both my jabs, I think I survived because of that. But the president saying, in terms of the visit here today, He's saying that he's happy with what he saw inside. And to be honest, Tilasizo, when we spoke to the people who come here to get inoculated, the public that comes here to get inoculated, they too were telling us that it's efficient. They don't wait in long queues. There is social distancing so that they are not too close to each other. So the public is happy, and so is the president. But here is exactly what he had to say to Lasizwe about his visit to the Rabasotho Hall here today.
We are making a great deal of progress. The numbers of vaccinations are ticking up. And one of the things I have come to check is whether they have any shortages of vaccines. They told me that they don't have shortages. They've never had shortages. But today is a bit of a slow day. And on a good day, they do manage to vaccinate quite a lot of people. And the Premier Makura, was telling me that he has directed that vaccination centers here in Gauteng must double their numbers, because we have so many people who still need to be vaccinated. And the minister is going to make sure that there's good supply. We now have a much more confirmed good supply of vaccines. We're not going to run short of vaccines. We're bringing in quite a lot of innovation in the vaccination process. And the minister was telling me that one of the innovations is drive-through vaccinations, where people just come, stay in their cars, and they're vaccinated, the screening happens, and then they move on. So this is a new innovation. I think it must be one of the few firsts in the world. And we keep looking for ways and means in which we can improve to increase the vaccination levels.
All right, that is President Cyril Ramaphosa. Thank you there to the reporting of my colleague Masego Rahlaga out in Tembisa. We are, of course, monitoring the other leg of the visit by the president, which will be in Midrand, and there we'll have eNCA's Siphamandla Goke tracking that leg of the visit to the vaccination sites.